Local programming on KRWG made possible in part by viewers like you. Thank you.
Welcome to Your Legislators, a production of KRWG Broadcasting. Your Legislators is a public service program providing our viewing audience in southern New Mexico the opportunity to hear about important legislative issues directly from their elected representatives in Santa Fe.
Welcome to Your Legislators. I'm Glenn Cerny, and pleased to be joined for this episode with Dr. Dan Howard, the Provost of New Mexico State University. Welcome to Your Legislators. And I think your question was, well, why would I be on Your Legislators? But the reality is, through the years, the 11 years we've done this show, we've regularly taken an opportunity to chat with not only the leadership of New Mexico State University, but people like Secretary Miley Gonzalez and Jeff Whitty for the New Mexico Department of Agriculture. And in part, Dan, I think one of the things we often overlook is the economic impact of both agriculture in this region as well as the university systems.
Well, no doubt. I mean, the university, as most people are aware, is the largest employer in the area. So things that happen here obviously have a major impact, and the impact of the New Mexico State extends across the state. It's not just regional.
Well, but it's also much broader than I think when I hear people say New Mexico State, there is a tendency to think about the Las Cruces campus. But,
right.
But the reality is, within the campus, you've got the community colleges. It's something that's referred to as research and public service programs, which, for full disclosure, I have to state that educational television is a line item in the state budget. So we are included in much of what you're talking about as well. So it's a much bigger scope than just saying, okay, it's the campus.
Yeah, no, New Mexico State University is it's a true system. We have 4 community colleges associated with the system in addition to the Las Cruces campus. We have Doña Ana Community College, NMSU Alamogordo, NMSU Carlsbad, and NMSU Grants. So, I mean, truly we are, and in addition to that, we are the only university in the state that has an office in every single county in the state. So we have 33 offices. We have 12 experiment stations. So we are truly a statewide entity. Well,
and as you and I have talked about on several occasions, that land grant status is something that we need to be doing, and so it makes it a much bigger scope. But we also have to mention that in addition to New Mexico State University, you've got Western New Mexico up in Silver City as well. So there's a lot going on there that a lot of people may not quite fully understand.
Yeah. Well, now, full disclosure, of course, Western New Mexico is not part of New Mexico State University. And Joe Shepard would not want me to be claiming Western New Mexico. We're happy to claim they're a fine institution. But
it is part of what's happening in this region.
No, it's absolutely. It's part of what's happening in the southern part of the state. And, we have a very, one of the things that's interesting about the educational system in the state of New Mexico is that I think there was a real effort made years ago to try and ensure that every citizen in the state had access to higher education. And it led to a proliferation of universities across the state, I believe. And it's hard to get a really good count, in all honesty, but it's about 31, I believe, institutions of higher education across the state, so that everyone in the state can pretty much almost literally drive to either a community college or a comprehensive university or a research university.
And I want to kind of bring it back to the campus because while I mentioned some of those other programs, there's one in particular that I know you're very proud of, but the College Assistant Migrant Program CAMP, which while it's a program sort of unto itself in this lobbying process, the success that it can help New Mexico State achieve is very, very important.
Well, I give all credit to Regents Professor Cynthia Bejarano and what she has built. That is just an absolutely wonderful program. She takes the most, really what would be the most at-risk students that come to New Mexico State University and helps them achieve a college education, and they do so at a rate that is far in excess of what you'd expect based on their background. It's a tremendously successful program, one that we're very proud of. And it's one that, again, it's an RPSB. Now, of course, one of the reasons that Glenn invited me onto this program is because this year we cut his program more than most programs. And one of the things that I told Glenn is, well, Glenn, one of the reasons that we can do that is because you have access to other sources of revenue, and you're not advertising enough, and you need to do more advertising. And so he's getting me back by having me on this program.
And you know, that was a very, I won't call it a warm negotiation, but it was a friendly negotiation. I don't know of anybody that goes in and says, oh yeah, could you give us more?
Oh yeah, no. I said, no, Glenn, you can do more advertising. And actually, I'm hearing it. I mean, I listen to KRWG FM. It's the way I wake up every morning. And when I turn it on, I hear there is now advertising that says, contribute. And of course, most people are happy to contribute. You guys do a wonderful job, both on the FM radio station as well as, of course, in the TV station.
And I also will quickly add that I kind of got even because on a letter I wrote, I mentioned that not many people say more. It's kind of like Oliver sitting there, more?
More, right.
But again, this is a difficult process, both in Santa Fe and here on the campus. And I want to come back to some of the steps the campus has been taking, but a lot of different states have different systems. We were talking about California. I'm very familiar with the Minnesota system, where you have the university system and the state system, where University of Minnesota Morris is in one place, and maybe 80 miles down Highway 59 is southwestern Minnesota State down in the Wilmer area. So New Mexico, this will not surprise anyone, can be a little different.
Well, where I would say that we're different is, well, first of all, let's go back to the state systems. So the state system that I was most familiar with, because my parents retired in California and I ended up going to college in California, is the Cal system, where you have a University of California system, which is your PhD research universities. You have the Cal State system, which is your comprehensive universities, but no PhD programs. And then you have a really terrific community college system. And to some degree, that's what we have in New Mexico. We have a community college system. We have 4 comprehensive universities. And then we have 3 research universities. And the 3 research universities are the University of New Mexico State, and New Mexico Tech. And so we sort of look like California. I think one of the things that differs in California is that California really has a strong emphasis on, you can start at a community college and then go into the Cal system. You can actually go into the University of California system. You can skip right over the Cal State system if you start at a community college. And they really have made their community colleges a great stepping stone into universities. We have done a less good job of that in New Mexico than I think I would have liked to have seen, or the chancellor would have liked to have seen. And so one of the things that we're working on very hard right now is to make sure that we actually do, especially at New Mexico State, and in collaboration with our community colleges, actually provide a pathway for coming into a community college, starting off at a community college, and then finishing at New Mexico State University, Las Cruces. We actually call it the Aggie Pathway Program.
Well, and Dr. Scott has been a very, very good partner, I think, in helping establish those lines as well with the community college. Okay, so that brings us to the point of, okay, all these universities up in Santa Fe, we're all calling on the same Senate Finance Committee, the Legislative Finance Committee, and I don't want to inflame any more Rio Grande rivalry, but is it a cooperative kind of approach? Is it, and I'm trying to avoid saying adversarial, but is it competitive?
Actually, it is quite cooperative. I think we all recognize that if we start competing with each other, become antagonistic with each other, we're simply going to make it much more difficult to make the case for higher education. And what we all believe in is that higher education is critical for the state. And so we work together to try and make sure that we can advance higher education in the state.
Well, but on the other hand, in the governor's state of the state speech, he talked about trying to combine some departments, and probably the easiest one would be tourism and the economic, but did not mention the universities. But later, Senator John Arthur Smith did make comment about the universities possibly being consolidated. And like any proposal, there's going to be things that are going to be helpful, and there's consequences that you're not going to find to be favorable. What is the general feeling about that conversation?
So it's an interesting conversation. It's one that we recognize that because we have so many institutions of higher education, we in some ways we underfund all of them as a result. And so the question is, could you combine them in some way that would achieve savings? And the answer is that there probably is a way of doing that, but it would be difficult to really achieve real savings without actually shutting some of the institutions down. That's a very difficult conversation to have when, for many of the counties or many of the areas where where a community college might exist, it is the single most important entity in that area, and shutting it down would be seen as a death blow to a local community. So that's a conversation that most of our state representatives, state senators really don't want to have. But I think John Arthur Smith is bold enough to say it may be a conversation we have to have. We have to figure out, we can't just keep underfunding our institutions of higher education. We have to figure out some way of funding them better, and one of the ways to do that is to have a smaller number of them.
And one of the things that I enjoy anytime I have the opportunity to chat with Senator Smith is A, he's not afraid to look at it, and B, he's incredibly realistic about the state of the finances of New Mexico right now. So, I mean, he's in a position where to at least forward that conversation. But you touched on it. I think one of the concerns when I've talked to representatives, especially from eastern New Mexico and Highlands, is, for those small communities, that institution is a real point of pride and economic development.
Absolutely. It was interesting. I was at a meeting at one point where one of our regents asked a group of legislators, is this a conversation we can have? And there was dead silence in the room about, can we have a conversation about potentially closing some institutions of higher education? So I think John Arthur Smith is one of the, you're right, John Arthur Smith understands the budget. He's a realist. He keeps, sort of pounding the table and saying, we've got to be realistic. We've got to live within our means in the state. We have to make some hard decisions. I think he would like people to make some hard decisions. It's a difficult conversation to have. And I think that for now, I don't see us going there in the next year or two or three. But eventually, if enough people keep saying we need to have this conversation, the conversation may take place, and we can talk about some way of consolidating higher education in the state where in a manner that still allows access. And the access is really important. I believe in access to higher education. That's what land-grant universities are all about, is making sure that the working person, the common man, had access to excellence, and had access to higher education. Many people don't realize that, we came about as a result of a law that was signed in, something that came out of Congress that was signed into law by Abraham Lincoln in 1862. And so being part of a land grant, I believe that we should have access, but I also believe that at some point in the state, we're probably going to have to make some hard choices, and those hard choices may involve some consolidation of higher education. We're not there right now. I don't see that conversation taking place right now.
Well, it also comes into it creates a conflict with what we're all saying, as we realize that education is one of the keys to training our workforce and moving the state forward, yet we're having these conversations about, well, how do we reduce that? So, there's another side of it there.
Right. No, that workforce development is, and especially when you look at our community colleges. That's what community colleges are really good at. They're really nimble. They're able to say, what is it? What are the workforce needs that the local community has, that the region has? How do we meet those workforce needs? Universities are a little bit different in that universities, yes, we're looking at workforce needs, but we're also recognizing that we're trying to train people who, and that a university education is something that prepares you for lifelong learning, and for the idea that we are likely, most of us are likely to have several careers. I'm actually I'm on my absolutely second career right now. I was not trained as an administrator. I was trained as a biologist, and here I am, a provost of a university. I have very little training for this other than I've been at a university for a long time. There's been a certain amount of assimilation, but I'm also a learner. I learned how to learn while I was going through my undergraduate education. I was going through my master's and my PhD. And so, I can wrap my head around it. I can figure out what I need to read, what I need to learn in order to be an effective administrator. And that's something that everybody's going to have to do going forward. forward, there are very few people who are going to get a job right after college and be in that job 30 years later. They're going to be doing something different 30 years later. So what is it that we give them? We give them a college education. We give them the skills necessary for them to continue to be a lifelong learner. We teach them how to critically think. We teach them how to engage in complex reasoning. We teach them how to communicate. We teach them to do a variety of things that are really going to be incredibly essential going forward. So we're providing, so universities like UNM, like NMSU, like New Mexico Tech are really providing for a global workforce, and then our community colleges are providing for a more regional workforce.
In our conversation here in the outset, we've kind of been at least insinuating looking for an increase in funding from the legislature. I don't think you could find anyone around Santa Fe that would say, oh, that's likely, because it just simply is not. But I think that there needs to be recognition of the efforts that especially the chancellor has made to try to rein in some of the costs that we have here on this campus. And you and I just speaking of things that we went through in a courteous manner, but perhaps not enthusiastic, with some pretty serious reorganizing of the administrative staff.
Right. So there's, again, that's what there is a recognition of there, and I give Chancellor Crothers great credit for saying we need to transform NMSU into a 21st century university. And what that is all about is recognizing that we need to protect the core mission of the institution, and we need to understand how to be more efficient, especially in our administrative processes. And so what we have been doing for the last 12 months fairly publicly is to work very hard to figure out where are there efficiencies in the university, what are the things that we are doing that administratively that are unnecessary or that are repetitive. And so we're really looking at, say, okay, for instance, one of the things that we discovered when we looked at the university, we discovered that the university, in many cases, we had managers who really weren't managing very many people. So we recognized that we needed to decrease the number of managers administratively. We've been doing that. We recognized that in some cases we had too many levels of management, that we would have departments that would have 5 and 6 levels of management. We're trying to decrease that, to try and get that down to no more than 3 or 4 levels of management in any given administrative unit. But in doing that, what we're doing is we're trying to say, if we can make those savings, if we can basically become a more efficient institution, then we can take those resources and put them where they really should be. And they really should be in our classrooms. They really should be in our research laboratories. They really should be in our public service projects that really serve the state. We should not be spending as much money on administration as we do. And so we think we've been a leader in positioning New Mexico State University so that as we know that there are going to be further budget cuts coming from the state. I mean, the budget picture for the state is not good. We're probably going to be able to weather those budget cuts better than other institutions of higher education because we've made the effort to trim our administrative expenses.
And I certainly don't mean to be insensitive when I point out the fact, but there's already been, 700 positions that have been eliminated on campus, and there's issues when you do even that, but the savings on that alone is an annual thing. It's not going to be just a one-year kind of positive thing to happen to the budget.
Well, and one of the important things about that is that almost all those positions have been lost as a result of attrition. Even when we had the major budget cuts this year where we took over 130 positions and eliminated over 130 positions, most of those positions were empty positions. So we were eliminating positions that didn't have people in them. Now we did have some positions that had people in them, and that was an awful situation for all of us to be in, to have to eliminate those positions. In most cases, we were able to find positions for the people who lost those positions somewhere else in the university where there was an opening that absolutely needed to be filled. So we've tried to keep the human cost as low as possible going forward. I would say this, there's not a lot of fat left in the university anymore. We've done a very good job of identifying where we could make changes that would not impact our mission. Going forward, it's going to be harder and harder to make cuts that do not impact our mission.
So allow me, as you know, can do pretty regularly, allow me to be flippant for a moment, and say, well, just raise tuition. Take care of all the problems and raise tuition. But there's issues there.
Well, that's right. I mean, because when you raise tuition, the worry is that you're diminishing access, and that's what we're all about. We're about access. So that is the worry, is that you diminish access, and of course that people worry about student loan debt. One thing I'm happy to report is that in New Mexico, student debt is less than you would see in our institutions of higher education are some of the best deals in higher education in the United States. And so our students typically come out with a debt, the average debt load is around $19,000, $20,000 at New Mexico State University. So we're not talking about students coming out with a $100,000 debt or $150,000 debt. But even so, when you start raising tuition, you start increasing those fears. But one of the things that I do want to do, I do think that we've actually gotten to a point in our society where those fears about student debt are in some cases keeping students from engaging in higher education when they would be well served. It's still a great investment. Think about this for a second. Basically, a $20,000 debt is what many people would go into to buy a motor vehicle that they will have for 5 to 10 years, whereas your education is something that we know will pay you back for the rest of your life. And you might take on $20,000 in debt in getting there. And one of the things about New Mexico in general that I think is absolutely terrific about this state is that the state is really committed to that access, so that there is the lottery scholarship that is available for students that have graduated from a New Mexico high school. So even in the case where we do raise tuition, I think the state has done a lot to try and make sure that students have the resources that will allow them to pay that tuition.
Let me throw another log on that fire, though, of, well, why don't you just create your more income? The reality is eligible students to attend college in New Mexico is diminishing. I mean, the demographics are leading us to a smaller and smaller pool. So
and so and that's one of the reasons that we had to shrink a little bit as well. I mean, our enrollment is going down. We are increasingly turning to an out-of-state pool to bring students into NMSU, and that's a special challenge for us. If you're not in a big urban center, then you're going to have to pull from a population. I mean, we're a big university for a town this size, and we have to pull from outside of the Las Cruces area, the outside of the Doña Ana County. But getting back to tuition, one of the things that I would say there is that we also, like most parts of government, if you need additional money, there are two ways to get there. If you need to somehow there are budget constraints. You can either cut or you can find revenue enhancements. For us, tuition is one of those revenue enhancements that we do need to take advantage of strategically. I mean, it isn't that we just say, well, we're just going to keep raising tuition. In fact, our regents refused to raise tuition last year, and that was one of the reasons that our cuts were as deep as they were last year. Going forward, I think that it's important from my perspective that we recognize that we have to be careful, we have to be economical, we have to be efficient, but we have to think about revenue enhancements as well.
But when you're up in Santa Fe, though, it's easy to put New Mexico State in a little more difficult situation. Well, all the other schools have raised tuition. Why haven't you?
Well, actually, what's happening right now is the chancellor just got back from Santa Fe, and I know that he got a lot of kudos up there for the idea that New Mexico State is really looking hard at how it's organized and trying to reorganize in a way to save money. So it isn't that they look at us and say, well, why aren't you raising tuition? They, at some level, applaud us for not raising tuition, but you can't. Eventually, you've got to use that other lever that you have for bringing in for making ends meet, and tuition is probably one of them. So going forward, I for instance, this year we've had. This year, New Mexico State University has taken a 7.5%. Our budget in 2017 took a 7.5% cut from the state, and one of the reasons the state did that, and they were very clear with us, is that you have other sources of revenue. You need to take advantage of them, and at some point we are going to have to take advantage of them in order to make ends meet around here.
Well, and one of the measurements that the legislators will use is your graduation rates, and there's been some controversy in requiring first-year students to stay on campus as residential students. Is that also perhaps playing well in Santa Fe?
I think it plays well from the perspective that we're doing it because we know that it will help with regard to student success. The data tell us that done well, students who live on campus, that if residential life is done well, students who live on campus do better in the classroom than students who are not living on campus. And that's our reason for doing it. And the other thing that I think is important to get out there is that even as we're doing it, and we think it is really important for students to live on campus, we also recognize that for a lot of local families, they would like to have their student live at home, that that it will save them money to have their student live at home. And so one of the things that we are allowing is that for our local families, for students who are going to live with their parents or live with a guardian or live with an extended family member, an aunt, an uncle, or grandparent, that they can live at home. We are still going to allow that. So even though we think it would be good for them from the perspective of their success as a student to live on campus, there are a variety of housing exemptions that will be allowed. That it isn't that there are no questions asked. We asked for you to verify that you're really living with a parent or you're really living with a guardian. But with that verification, which is fairly straightforward, you can live at home.
I would have known I was going to introduce this question this way. I would have prepared better. I threw my tea bag away, but let me put you on the spot here. Okay. Looking at the tea leaves, how do you think the legislator is going to respond to, I told you it was an unfair question, respond to the request from New Mexico State University?
For our budget?
Yes.
At this point, what I will tell you is that we've already looked into. They've already prepared their budget. We know what the budget holds for us for 2018. Here's the good news: is that we took big cuts in 2017. They've had to close a budget gap of $69 million, and they need to build up the state reserves. And they have done that without coming to higher education for any further cuts. They've actually recognized that we took more than our fair share of cuts in the initial cutting that has taken place, and they've not asked us for any more. Going into next year, I think that there's a strong sense that we've given it the office, that we have done, that we have really taken some big cuts to help the state get through its current budget crunch. Next year, the budget as it currently exists, and this can change, these things are not written in stone, that is for sure. The LFC budget reduces our funding by about 0.3%, and the DFA budget reduces us by about 1.1%. So we know what's in store for us, and those are numbers, knowing what is out there for us, we can prepare for that. And my hope at this point is that we don't go any deeper than that, but we will have to see. The revenue projections are the next revenue projection is a few days away. We'll see what that looks like. There has been some good news with regard to gross receipt taxes recently,
and oil prices.
So we'll see. I'm cautiously, very, very cautiously optimistic, but we'll see.
It's been 11 years that I've been on campus, and I'm not sure I've ever seen a place where this place isn't busy, but Provost Howard, thank you for taking the time from your busy schedule to chat with us today, and it also opens up my opportunity from the conversation you just heard to remind you that programs like this are possible by contributions from viewers like you. So thank you for joining us for Your Legislators. I'm Glenn Cerny. Enjoy the weekend.